So in the previous video, we did a few basic operations with printf and scanf statements. So now let's take this one step further and try to make our program more interactive. So what if we want our program to tell the users if they have more than certain number of apples, we want to tell them that they have too many apples and maybe they should give them away. Or if they have less than certain number of apples, they can keep it. The way we check for conditions in C language is by using something called as an if-else statement. So let's see how you could write them. You would say if num apples, let's say we want to compare it with 5 number of apples. So we'll say if num apples is greater than 5, we'll add a pair of curly brackets. We want to say printf, you have too many apples. Else, so if the user has less than 5 number of apples, we want to say printf, you have a few apples. And notice we added a tab over here. I mean, if we want, we could have everything in just one line and it would still work fine. The only reason to have a tab over here is to make it more readable. As we said in our previous videos, you are not just writing this program for yourself, but for others to read it as well. So you should make every effort to make it as readable as you can. So let's try to compile and run this and let's see if this works. So we'll say GCC, so it compiles without any errors. Let's run it. How many apples do you have? Let's say I say 10. Now it does say you have too many apples. The only thing I don't like is we should have added a new line character over here. So with that, you know enough of C language to do our first quiz. And your task is to create the game Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So essentially, we want you to create a quiz. We want you to have at least 4 questions. Each of the questions will have at least 4 options. If the user gives you a right answer, you should give him +1 point and -1 point for wrong answers. And in the end, your program should print out the user's final score. So this is how I would go about writing this program. First, you set up your template and you do all the regular stuff that you do. You include the stdio.h file and then we welcome our user to the game. Next, let's go ahead and write our first question. So we'll say printf, who is the president of the United States? Then let's give users 4 options. And now we want to wait for the users to give us their input. And as we saw in our previous videos, the way you would take input from the user is by using the scanf statement. So in the previous videos, we have seen that to scan an integer, we use a %d. So we want to scan if the user is typing in option A, B, C or D. So what should we write over here to scan your character? Well, in this course, I'm not always going to tell you what you should be using. And in such situations, your best friend is going to be Google. So if I were you, I would go to Google and say %d. So I would say C language first. Say %d is integer. Let's see what we get. This concept seems to be called format specifiers. So the percentile is the format specifiers. The percentile specifiers that you can use in C are %C for character, %d for integer, and so on. And what we want is to scan a character. So we'll use the %C. So let's go back to our program. We'll say %C. So we don't have a location to store the answer. So let's go ahead and write a location where we'll store our answers. So what should its type be? The way you define characters in C language is by using the keyword char. So you would say char, let's say user selection, and we'll store the user's answer at address of user selection, right? So as soon as I reach this point, if I were you, I would first print it out to the screen and see if I have done this part correctly before moving ahead. So let's just print this user selection out. So let's say user selected %C user selection, right? So let's first clear the screen. Then we'll say, let's compile this. I mean, there is an error. So we need to say printf. So now let's try that again. It compiles without any errors, so it means that we are okay. Let's try to run this. So the first two print statements went correctly. Next, it's asking us to give an input. Let's say if we said A, it says user selected A. So I think our program is doing fine until here. Let's go back to our program. We don't need this statement. We were just checking if we are correct until here. Now we want to check if the answer was correct. So we'll say if user selection is equal to A. Now note, I'm using two equal to signs over here. In C, or in fact in most programming languages, a single equal to will assign the value to a variable, whereas a double equal to sign, you are doing a comparison. So this is a common mistake most students make while initially learning C language, is that they use a single equal to sign while comparing things. So if the answer was correct, we wanted the user score to be 1, but we haven't defined any variable to store the final score, right? So let's go ahead and say int final score. So let's start the final score from 0. Final score equals to final score plus 1, right? Or if the user didn't give a correct answer, we want to say else final score is equals to final score minus 1, right? So let's see if we got this part correctly. So we'll say printf user score is, we'll say percentile D because it's an integer, and final score. Let's clear the screen. Let's compile it. It compiled without any errors. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's say if we say A, which is the right answer, and it gives us user score is 1. So that was correct. Let's run it again and let's see if we give a wrong answer, what happens. And user score is minus 1 because 0 minus 1 will be minus 1, right? So that's correct. And just like you did for one question, you would repeat these statements for 3 more questions to get a quiz which is made up of 4 questions. So I hope you enjoyed doing that quiz, and we'll be doing more such fun programs in coming videos.